Today is July 15th, 2006. I am Jessica Clark. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project near Tramping Lake, Saskatchewan. Can you start by stating your full name?
Elizabeth Barbara Lang.
And what is your maiden name?
Rissling.
Okay. Where were you born?
Scott, Saskatchewan, the hospital there.
You were born in a hospital?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was that common back then to be born in a hospital, or?
Yeah, if they made it. Like it was usually you had to go by horse and sleigh, usually open sleigh, depending how quick they were trying to get there. Hooked up two horses and go like everything. Because there was only a train that went once a week, and I think it usually was Tuesdays, so if you were lucky enough that it happened that day, you could get there. Safer, maybe, and warmer. Yeah.
Liz, can you tell us some of your earliest memories, some of your first memories?
Let me see. Probably Christmas, I would say, because that's when you would get a special gift and you get all the goodies and the peanuts. Oh, and one thing was halwa. There was no anything better than that halwa years and years ago. It doesn't compare to what now that you have now in the stores. But everybody, it would come in a tin box and everybody would get a little piece. Oh, when I think of it, I'm just hungry. And we'd always get maybe this little doll that we were looking for, or especially, girls, they like little purses. And I got a red one. Oh, I treasured that, I think, forever.
So how would you celebrate Christmas when you were a child? What types of things did you do to celebrate that time of year?
Okay, how did it go again? Well, first, to prepare for Christmas, there was always homemade sausage, German. And I remember my dad it had to be made a few days before Christmas, so it was fresh. And then they'd smoke it. So there was always midnight mass. So after we come home from mass, there was usually 3 masses. So that got late. And that was when the kettle would go on and they cooked this sausage, and that was our lunch. And so the next morning, well, there was chores to be done. And then back to church again. And then some more cooking when they got home for dinner. And usually there could be turkey, and sometimes there was always a goose made, like also with sausage, like the midnight, well, we called it after midnight lunch. Oh, stories, remember them. And, but, Christmas Eve, that was the best part and the scariest part. Because usually we knew there's something not very good was coming, so we'd get into the folks' bed and we cover up, and then all of a sudden there was a noise. Oh my goodness, were we scared. It was rattling, and here this big monster come in. Well, to us it was a monster. He had this big fur coat on, this big fur hat, and he was making all kinds of sounds. Well, when you're kids, you're scared. So next, the chains, they had just like logging chains, or well, probably a little smaller. I don't think they were that heavy, but they were chains. And he was rattling them and coming closer to the bed and just carrying on. Oh, were we scared. We put the covers over, and then he got, louder. And we got more scared. Then he finally left, and we thought we had our maid. Then here comes something white. a sheet over. We called him in German the Christkind. That means Christ child, I guess. But he had what you call like a whip, and it was usually from the Carigana whip. You know, those were tougher, and he probably hurt more too. So they come in like he was all covered over the head, and he was hitting and hitting with his stick and coming closer, and then he would ask if we were good. Yeah, right, we were too scared to even say we weren't. And then he'd be beating on the bed, on the sheets with that, like trying, I guess, not to hurt us, but I think we were more scared than hurt. Then finally, then when he thought he had everything straightened out the way he wanted, here comes some bags. Holy, what was in them bags? Treats, our Christmas candy and peanuts and name it. And then he left. He left them bags and he left. So then we were safe after that. It took a while till we went for those bags. So that was the best part, I guess, at Christmas time. And it was family. Like we were all together and happy. But you know who those two characters were? They were my brother or maybe my uncle come or one of my sisters, the older ones. But as we got older, we figured this out. Well, why? These are always missing, a certain one in the family. Yeah, there's our answer. They are the ones that are causing us all this worry. But, it was funny.
So how old would that tradition, like how old were you when that was going on?
Well, I guess when we were born, that happens every year like that. But as you get a little older, you remember it and you're scared.
At Christmas time, would you have a Christmas tree?
Oh yeah, right. And a real one. I don't know if you didn't have one growing in your yard, like on the farmyards, you could buy one like it was chopped down. But it had to be from the ceiling. No, ceiling. From the floor to the ceiling, that tall. And there always had to be a star on the very top. But no, like we didn't have electricity then. So it was just no lights on it. But we were able to string popcorn and decorate your tree and maybe some cutout stuff and hang it up. But that tree, that was Christmas because you could smell it. Oh, nothing like pine, the pine smell. And you had to put it in water for sure so it would keep, and because you had the coal and wood fire, so there was kind of dry air in there, so you had to be very careful, I guess. But I still see that tree. And bushy, that had to be and you looked so forward to it. The house had to be cleaned and everything had to be just right because this was special. And then usually we always looked forward to as kids, my mom's sister and her husband, Uncle Lawrence and Aunt Johanna. They would come by horse and sleigh all the way from way out west in the coulees there where they farm and go to this. They come to the farm and they'd join like after supper, or they'd come for supper and come as like with us kids all to enjoy all this Christmas Eve. And then they'd all go to church when it was time. But a lot of times we got sent to bed for about an hour. At 11 o'clock we had to get up for sure to be ready to go in the sleigh to drive to church. But nobody could fall asleep. So when it was time to go, that's when you wanted to sleep. So there was a lot of yawning and who knows what else. And then I know the dad used to put a battery in, like this was a long sleigh. And there was always two horses like pulling it. It was our Sunday sleigh, you'd almost call it, a big family. There was enough room in it. And it was silver, the outside. And they'd put this battery in and then put a light on top, like outside on top. So you could, usually it was very dark at night. That there was not moonlight, so they could see the trail to get to church. And then you had to go to the school barn and then walk down to the church. Usually that was my older brother and Dad that had to do it. And that used to be cold, and walk that far down to, that was at Revenue, like to the church there. And nobody stayed home. Everybody went, no matter how little or how old you were. Nobody stayed home. And there was all those chores you had to do, milk and the pigs to be fed and chickens and name it. But I don't know, everybody was happy then. Those days, no matter how much hard work. And what else?
Was there a Christmas program at school when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, that was a big thing. That, like, we had nuns, like, for teaching, like sisters, and there was always the biggest program put together. And we even I was even lucky enough to, we had a German play, and we had to talk German. And man, there were some German words the nuns, like, they told us, like, or learned us how this play went, and you had to talk German. And then we had some actions going this way and that way, and afterwards everybody was trying to make those actions what we had to say, but be darn, I didn't understand what this all meant, and yet I couldn't talk a word of English when I went to school. I don't know, there must have been too much of a high German in there or something. But it was, that was, I don't know, the highlight, I guess, what you call, like, for Christmas. This was always before the holidays started. They had to have that Christmas concert. And they'd come from near and far, everybody, even like to the next towns, like, that weren't far apart. You'd visit there also, enjoy the programs.
How about Easter? How would your family celebrate Easter?
Oh, that colorful Easter. Those eggs, right? As I remember, I was still quite young, but we didn't know about what all went on with this coloring of eggs and stuff. So there was always a school sleigh, that winter school sleigh, because Easter usually was early and was cold. So us younger kids, my older sister would put me out there, or put us out. I said my other three younger brothers, sister, and they disappear in there, but we weren't allowed to come in the house. And then once in a while, my sister would come out and check on us, bring us a treat, like to eat or something to drink, but we weren't allowed to go in. We didn't know what was going on. This was too secret. But somehow, pretty soon, it was long though, and all of a sudden they said, well, now we can come in the house. But here there was colored eggs, like there was an open veranda on the house. There was eggs in every corner, and like, they kind of hid them, you know. But how they did it, I don't know, because we used to watch and wait. Hopefully maybe they come out and we can go back in the house once. And here they snuck them out, and it says, well, the Easter rabbit come early. Oh, heavens. And well, of course, yeah, there was church. Oh, lots of church. Going with what you call it, the wagon, and the two horses. You know, they had to pull because this was spring, and usually there was mud and maybe, you know, some snow and ice and ruts, and oh, was that rough. Did you get a good shaking until you got to church and home? There was a lot of church going on at Easter. Like, there was Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then Holy Saturday, and then Sunday. Oh, what a celebration on Sunday there. There was something of, you know, like special kind of things, like chicken. Well, there always had to be soup, especially on the farm years ago. Every Sunday had to be soup. So there was always a special meal prepared for that day. And visiting, for sure. And usually, like my grandfather, Rissling, like on my dad's side, and Grandma, they were, 2 miles or a little better to their place where they lived. So we go visit them everybody would get together around 3 and visit, and she always had baked for us pneumonia cookies, they call them. Ah, they were to die for. Only Grandma knew how to bake those, because I've baked them, years later too. It was always a tradition, like at Christmas or Easter, were those pneumonia cookies with icing on. But and Grandma Rissling, she had mixed chocolate in, and who doesn't love chocolate, especially those kind. And I don't know. And she was like, they were older, but they were always so glad to see us. But, we were more fortunate on my dad's side that they all kind of lived close by. And one of his sisters, and they were at Wilkie, and they'd always come to visit. So by the time we left, there was another family come. So she must have been a tired grandma by evening. But we'd never, stay for supper because I knew it was too much for her. And so, I don't know. It was fun.
You mentioned that it had a lot to do with church, that it was a busy time for church with Holy Thursday and Good Friday. Could you tell us a little bit about what each day represented and what you would do?
Holy Thursday. Well, it had to do, I guess, with a lot of prayers and Palm Sunday. No, Palm Sunday, that was a week before Easter started. That all leads into the way of Easter session, how it went with Jesus, like when they put him to death on Good Friday. And Holy Thursday was a lot kind of like Palm Sunday, getting ready for what was coming. And Holy Saturday like Good Friday is like when they put him to death, and then you had to go down on 2 knees to genuflect when you come into church. And there was no music. Like the organ was not allowed to play. And even at home, you weren't allowed. The radio was not allowed on. And while you had a fast, there was no meat. You had to have fish or other things that didn't pertain to meat products and stuff. And you had a fast, to kind of do penance in a way is what you call it maybe, for being that our Lord died for us on the cross and stuff. So on Saturday it was kind of like holy water. They kind of blessed the holy water like it was like for baptism. And then Easter Sunday was like when our Lord was supposed to have risen and descended to heaven or wherever they say, like we're supposed to believe, and not doubt, I guess, whatever. So that's what kind of this Easter kind of leads up to. I don't know, maybe someone else can explain it better.
No, that was great. That was great.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about July 1st? How would you celebrate July 1st?
Well, what I remember was a lot of them always, the parents and the family went to Loosland because they had rodeo and ball games and whatever. But I only got there once that I remember in my life because somebody had to stay home, do milk, get the cows home from the pasture and milk, do chores. And I was just a kid, but I milked with my mom before I went to school. And by hand, there was always milking all year round. There was always at least 8 cows, I would swear, plus way more. And so Mom always needed help. And I don't know, I kind of knew that she needed help. I didn't even have to ask her. So I was always trying to, follow in her footsteps, I guess. And so I was the one, I was never scared to stay at home alone. And so I'd get the cows and milk and separate, and then feed the calves that needed milk, like the separated milk. Or if they were smaller, you always left some of the milk that you just milk from the cow because there was cream in it. It was better for them until they got older, and then they got separated milk. And then you had to save the cream because you had to turn the separator by, there was a handle on, you had to turn it First it had to be washed morning and night, like before you milked, or after you milked, you had to wash because all the cream, it would get sour, like, because we didn't have fridges in those days. And so there was always that to do first, and then bring them home, put them in a pen. They weren't tied up. And I don't know, when I was smaller, I would just stand there, like, just fit close to the cow and have a pail under there, and then milk. And sometimes the cow would look back at you and I'd look at her, but she didn't run away. And if one heifer, like when she had her first calf, would, kick once in a while, then you put those cow kickers on, like in the back legs. But one day I don't know, maybe one of those flies bit her, or maybe a pinched her when I was stripping and milking her. Holy Moses, she bucked like the bucking bronco, and there flew the cow kickers, and I was laying there with the pail and only a little bit of milk left. My mom never said nothing. She just smiled, like she was a quiet woman. If she approved, she just smiled. Oh, I can still see that. Oh, just like a bronco. But we went back to milking again, and then I figured, well, I'll be smart. I'll stick my head against, the side, like we're up on her stomach part. So she didn't kick after that, but as I got older, I learned they got a good swat, though, when they did that to me. Oh, but, that was hot and cold or whatever, like they'd be chase them in the fence, in the pen, and that's where you went to milk. Then you had a open sleigh, a low one that wasn't covered. Then you'd set your milk there on the bench until you were done, or wherever there was room to set it, and then carried it over to the, what they called, the shed where we did the separating, and carried hot water down to wash everything up and stuff. So there was lots of chores. So I got sidetracked with this July 1st.
But it's a good sidetrack. It's a really good story.
Oh, and so that's kind of the reason. I didn't look forward to going, really. I don't know. I liked being home, and I loved animals. And I don't know. My dad was natured that way with animals. They would just come around you, and I don't know. They weren't scared. Like, we could chase them anywhere. We'd take our dog and our horse, and they would just listen. They wouldn't get all upset. And, some other family members or somebody come, they would just scatter, like, they were scared. Like, but I don't know, they just sensed, I guess, the way you were natured. And I don't know, what else?
Well, why don't you tell us about falling in the
Oh, I don't know if I could have been maybe about 5. How did that go? Oh, well, in the summer months, you didn't really wear shoes except when you went to church Sundays. So you'd always be running barefooted, so they got pretty tough. So if there's mud, name it, and so I thought, well, I'll wash my feet, and there's this trough at the end of the wooden trough, the big long one, and so I washed them off there, and I thought, well, if I go now that they're washed, I'll be just muddy again. So I sat up the higher trough, like where all the water was in for the cattle and the horses. So I started swinging my feet. I figured, if I swing them, they'll dry off quicker. All of a sudden, but there I was laying in the trough on my back, and I thought I was dead. I passed out. Well, it seemed like I passed out. It was just like, or maybe knocked out or whatever. But thank God that trough wasn't full. Because, I lay there stunned. And I start calling, but it didn't come out very loud. But they were in there playing that, that old organ where you had to pump, by foot and pull those darn things out to make different sounds or chords or whatever. And they were singing, my Lord, were they singing away? They were done, and they sang again, and then they start singing Old Rugged Cross. And I thought, oh my God, I am going to die for sure. And to this day, I do not like that song. Old rugged cross, and here I'm laying in there and I can't get out, and I'm calling and they don't hear it. Oh man. So all of a sudden something is looking atop of me here. It's a cow coming for water. Yeah, and then she looks and she just jumps back while I'm laying there. No wonder I would too. She probably figured I was a crocodile or something. And pretty soon another cow comes and another one, but they're not going to drink water. They looked and they seen the other one. She was not coming to drink water, so they followed the lead. Then here comes the horse. Then another horse. Nobody was drinking water because I was in there. So I must have, I guess, come out of the shock. I guess maybe that's what describes it better. And I think maybe I kind of got rolled to the side. Somehow I think I must have got out. And then they got an earful once I come in there. And I was soaking wet, and they just looked at me. They were shocked, but I let them have it for their singing and playing. Oh, there's things I've forgotten, and here finally I remembered. And I says to Phil, I should have made a note of these things. It was funny. But, you know, it was in the evening. That was pastime, I guess. And usually you had the windows open in these old houses trying to get some fresh air. That even the neighbors, I think a quarter mile, or was it almost a half a mile, they were outside. They'd hear that singing and playing the organ, like my sister and, no, not my brother, the three sisters. And they enjoyed hearing them sing. And I thought, yeah, right. They can sing all right, and you can die in the meantime, too.
Did you ever learn to play a musical instrument?
Later on, I played the guitar, but I don't know. You kind of get out of it when you get married and have kids. There doesn't seem to be time for some reason. At that time, maybe now there would be. And I used to sneak Dad's button accordion, and used to take it outside, like in the shade. And well, like the water troughs and that, everything was really close, and the barn, like into the house. So I got a few pretty good tunes out of it. You know, you practice and practice. But pretty soon you had an audience, but not people though. They were my friends, my cows and my horses and my calves, and they just loved listening to that. Yeah, they wouldn't go away, not for even a long time after I quit, and I figured, wow, that would scare them the way I played. So it must have been their kind of music. Oh.
Did you ever?
Oh, a tonette I played. Like I could play by note, and while you had to learn that at school, I think when you were about grade 4, like you always had to take some kind of well, it was always the tonette, no other instrument. And I found those notes so hard. Oh man, I hated them. But you could play by heart once you had the tune. And the guitar I could play.
Were you self-taught on the guitar, or did you take lessons?
No, just self-taught. But I did try, well, with some of those notes when I learned that tonette, I was able, well, I knew the chords, and I could chord good, but I don't know, I kind of feel bad that I got away from it, because on the Rissling side, they are musical, and they had bands and sing. But you know, a lot of the older people, like my dad, and that when they come from the old country, as they grew up, they were all musical, like they could all play something. And they had orchestras, and they had good music, man. And what else? How did it all go? Oh, and like whenever there was a picnic, like at church or whatever, nobody stayed home. Everybody went. Or if there was a wedding or they had a dance in the hall, all the babies, everybody went. Nobody stayed home. And then the little ones, they'd be put in a corner. The parents, whoever, like if it was winter, they had their coats. They'd all lay them out on the floor, and all the little ones, they'd lay them down. They go to sleep. And then there's usually a few coats left to throw over top so they wouldn't get cold. But boy, that was okay. But pretty soon the polka started. And you know how that goes. Pretty active. And here all these little ones are sleeping in this corner. Well, pretty soon the mothers got wise. They kind of stood around to make sure nobody would fall on them. Because, you know, they make fast polka music in circles. And we did the same when our kids were little. And didn't leave them home. They always went along. And if the mothers had to help, you know, in the kitchen or serve the lunches, like when there was picnics and stuff, then the dads had to look after them. I don't know if they liked that very much. Because usually they wanted to go back to where their mothers were because they knew there was food there too. But I don't know, everybody did things together, like, you know, and got along so well. And the world has changed so much. It's not like it used to be. And everybody helped each other out as you were growing up or shared things. And when summertime, oh, we got to get back to this ice cellar because there was no fridges, right? So in the wintertime, they would, you could make it at home or go to the lakes where certain men would cut these big squares of ice, and they'd haul them home. And then there was this deep, like they call it the ice house, like a deep, just like a cellar. And they throw this in, all these square pieces of ice, and then they would haul water to freeze it like one big square block. And that's where you kept your cream, your milk, like you chopped a hole out in and put your crock, like where you had your stuff in, or pails. That's what was your fridge. And I remember at our place, we had these water troughs, and my brother, my dad, they'd chop and chop to make ice and then haul it up with a stone boat with a horse, pulled it up and threw it in, and that took a long time. Well, that was pastime for the winter, right? Hard work. And till they had enough in, like all that ice brought it all the way up, and then they had to haul water. And every day for however long it took, because it was always cold enough that it would freeze into one solid block. And that was what they called our fridge, or deep freeze, or whatever. And then when summer come, oh yeah, they put straw over top, quite a bit of straw to keep it like cool or whatever, so it wouldn't melt as quick. And that would last till pretty well fall. And but now getting back to this block of ice, so when it come to like meat for the summer, like they'd butcher a pig, one family, and they would share it, you know, divide it up, and then they would cure it, like that means, you know, like salting and curing it, and then put it in these big crocks, like you had big wide ones, and with the brine, and left it in there until whenever you needed a piece of meat or want to use beef, like you would get a piece out and cook it. Otherwise, it would stay just, you know, nice and icy cold, and till it was used up. And then when all the meat, like with the neighbors, wherever you shared, and then the next farm would, it would be their turn. And that's how the summer, it carried on into the fall, as long as there was ice, that you were able to have, you know, fresh meat. And other than that, you canned, like your chicken and beef, like you'd fry your beef, like you can it in chars, but you had to cook it on a boiler on the stove for 3 hours. And my God, that was hot. We had to put coal and wood and cow chips in there to have enough heat to so you could, you know, open a cold can of or char of chicken, like, you know, Sundays after church it was too hot, and you'd have just cold chicken and whatever. And the same with beef. You could do that too, but it was always good to make gravy with that though. Because it was, you had to fry it off. Oh, what a bunch of work. Because I did that also when we were married. And, carry on tradition, I guess. But the good part was what? Ice cream. Just about every day, we all had to take turns to chop the ice to little bits. Like they had these big ice cream, like to turn. You had to pack ice around the outside and this certain salt, like, what did they call it? I forgot. And we'd be turning this ice cream, but no, we couldn't wait till it was ready. It took a long time. You got to turn. Pretty soon it got heavy, and then you knew it was coming to the end. But, and then when it was, you couldn't turn it anymore. You'd break the handle probably. Then the middle had to come out, though, the paddles where that turned. Oh, everybody was lined up waiting to lick that or take a spoon. And, but chocolate was always our favorite. Had to be chocolate. Well, we got, they'd ask us, like our older sister, which kind we'd want. There was like almonds. They call it in German Nüsse. I didn't like that. Oh, I couldn't handle that, but she used to feel sorry for me. She'd always give us a chance to ask which we would like. Well, she knew it was chocolate, but she wanted to tease me, I guess. So we didn't get almond ice cream very often then because they knew I was the only one. I don't know, maybe I was allergic to it. I just could not handle it. But lots of chocolate and vanilla, but that was ice cream, not like now. No matter what good brand you have in the store, it's no comparison. But you had to eat it up, though. Well, with a big family, it didn't last long. But it was every day, almost as, you could say every day, especially the hot months in the summer. So, but we had to take turns chopping that ice, and that was hard. Like when you're little and you hit that axe, sometimes you had to make sure you didn't miss.
Did you help in the kitchen a lot when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah. My mom, I used to watch her, when it was canning time. She, like peaches, that was usually our favorite fruit. Well, I knew she put them in hot water and then in cold and then peel them, but there was always the syrup or whatever you had to make. No, what do you call that? Anyway, the juice like that you had to make to put in. So it was always one cup of sugar, 2 cups of water. So you put it, I had this big soup kettle, we always called it. So you made enough, you knew for how many chars and how, that it would last. And you had to heat it up and stir the sugar then so it would melt. So that was usually my job. And she didn't, like I watched her, she didn't have to tell me 1 cup of sugar, 2 cups of water. So I always would help her do that and to help peel the fruit then and pick the garden stuff. Like whenever it was canning, I would be there helping. Well, so did my older sisters, but as they got older, they left. So pretty soon I was next in line for all the harder work. But before I even went to school, I would help her. And then all the big gardens, and we had Saskatoon berries and raspberries, bushes. Oh, you were working all the time. There was, summer months wasn't holidays like kids have now. You didn't sleep in because there was milking and all these chores. And when it was hot, you had to hook up your stone boat with the horse and fill water from the water trough. And we used to fill the beer bottles with them long necks and stick them beside the cucumber plant. So, like we had such hot weather always. So they would, to keep them watered. That's the way we watered them. We didn't waste water then. And, did it give vegetables years ago. Man, oh man, was there lots of food. And in that garden. And, well, even the raspberries, like to pick all them and clean them and had to be canned and Saskatoons. And when you didn't have enough, you went to the lake, down to the coulee, I should say, where there was the wild ones. Those were good too, boy. They didn't grow as big as the ones that you grew at home. Oh man, that was something else. But we look forward to, we enjoyed doing that.
With the berries, would you make jams or preservatives, like for spreads?
Oh yeah.
How did you do
Jam
that?
and, pardon me?
How'd you do that?
Well, you had to prepare them, right? And you cook them like you make homemade jam, like your sugar and add sourdough to kind of thicken it. You had to know not to add too much or you'd have cement maybe to try and put on your toast. Yeah, getting back to toast. We didn't have a toaster. We didn't have power. So you open the side of the coal and wood stove. There was a lid, like when you could add, more wood into it or coal. There's always the lids on top that you had to lift to add. But this was the side, so you could stick a long fork with your toast at the end, and hoping the odd time she fell into the hot coals. But you had to make sure that it wasn't too strong a fire, like for toasting. But darn it, that was good. We even did corn like that. Poked the corn and roasted corn through the... that was good food.
So tell me what would be a typical breakfast when you were growing up? What would you have for breakfast?
Okay, as we were smaller, we called it Brei in German. That would be just like a milk pudding kind of. Like milk, you added sugar, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of salt, and then you used cornstarch to thicken it. And it was better like when you were really small, like especially babies, which I did too when our kids were little. There was no baby food then. And, the way we ate was too harsh for them. And then that's what they got. Or we got, even as we got older, because it was so darn good. Or you'd throw a little bit of cinnamon on top. And, that was good. But then got to be porridge, cream of wheat, cornmeal we liked the best. I think I did. And but there was also cornflakes, cases. They would buy them by the cases, not just one box like we do now, because a big family went through it and was probably cheaper. So, but. We found later on, cornflakes, like porridge, you put a little bit of cornflakes on top, and then your milk and your sugar. That was so much better. Then we enjoyed the oatmeal or porridge or whatever you call it for breakfast. So that was our tradition. And when my husband come up, like Philip, to our place, like he come to visit. Well, we were starting to date, I guess, and he had to stay overnight because, I don't know, he come up to pick up a horse from there and ride it home, but it got too late. So he was allowed to stay overnight. But far enough for me, though. They made sure, I made sure. And anyway, how did it go? Oh, so of course we had porridge for breakfast. Well, that was tradition, right? But we also put cornflakes on top, so that I did that for him. Well, he looked at it first, then he watched what we did, and he says, after that, that's how he ended up learning that tradition. How to put cornflakes on top of your porridge and then add the rest. And that is much better. You try that.
I will have to try it. I've never heard of it. When you were having breakfast, what would you have to drink with it? Would you have coffee or juice or
milk? As we got a little older, which I was a bread eater, and butter and syrup on top, and coffee. My dad always used to laugh at me. I was a coffee drinker then.
Black coffee?
Nope. Later on, it had to be black because I'm kind of allergic to milk. So we used to have ice cold milk, and like for dinner, And but later on, I don't know, I had allergies and somehow no more with milk.
You mentioned butter. How did you make butter back then?
Well, uh, see, when you separated your milk, that's why you separated, because you wanted the cream. Uh, so you set your little square thing, like if you want it thinner, cream, or thicker. Well, you had to learn, because at first it got pretty thick. It hardly come out the pipe. Oh, and then finally says, but that Liz, she seems to know everything. I set it for Mom, and then we got table cream, they called it, and that was brought more money, table cream. I says, that Liz, she knows everything. Figures out everything, I should say. Not knows everything, but figures out. And so that's what you use then. You put it in a square, what do you call those, glass jars, sort of? Well, they were more specially, and then you had paddles. You had to turn this on top, and then there was a crank. And you turned, and you turned, and turned. Finally, it started getting thicker and thicker, and then pretty soon you had some liquid, and you had butter. So you take it out, unscrew the top and take it out and wash it, and then add, go through a few washes, like to get all the liquid that formed, it was kind of milky or watery, and put salt in, and worked it with your hands, I guess, and fold, and then put it in a dish, whichever you wanted, and there you had your butter. But it also, if you didn't have a cold place to put it, you had to carry a lot of stuff out to that ice house.
How far was the ice house from the house?
Not very far. I wonder if it was as long as this house. Okay. Yeah, it wasn't very far, but, for running for every little thing, it, kept you in shape. Nothing else.
How about making cheese?
Cottage cheese?
Yeah.
There were certain cows. I know we used to check too when it come to milking. We just take glasses out from the house, so we know which cow give the most cream. Like it would have to set so the cream would form on top and the milk stays underneath. So if one cow, she didn't give us that much cream, she went down the road. Or we maybe put a calf on her and let him worry about it. And so that's how we got our, to make butter then. Made your own butter. Oh, and cottage cheese, another way, right? So we got rid of that. No, we didn't need, I think, the whole milk, like everything. And while you strained it and then set it in an enamel kettle and let it get kind of sour. So I forget, some would sour quick, and some, if they didn't, well, we kind of knew which cow to save this milk from. Then you would put it on the stove and cook it. Not cook it, I mean bring it just to a boiling point, and it would kind of get, like it was thicker. And then you took it out and poured it in a, we call it a cheese bag or whatever, or you could always use a tea towel, and let it drip. And then when it was done dripping, and you had to put it in a cool place, and you had cottage cheese. And then you added your ingredients, whatever you wanted. You make pierogies with that. And you added salt and pepper, eggs, and put it in the pierogies, or just added cream, a little cream, just to have cottage cheese like you buy in the store. It was always work, but I don't know, I guess it kept you in shape and you enjoyed life. I don't know. I think everybody was happier then because there was always something to do, Little kids, no matter.
When you were growing up, the noon meal, was it called lunch or was it called dinner?
Dinner. Germans, they all said dinner.
What would you have for dinner?
Soup and, some meat. Sometimes we cook like pork hocks and sauerkraut and potatoes. that was a rip sticker for all that hard work. And, and of course, those big jars of fruit, not the quart jars, the bigger ones. There always had to be fruit on that table, dinner and supper. And it would be gone, too. Well, there's usually big families, usually 6, 8, or even 10. So you needed more than one big jar. So you know your cellar was well stocked. So that's where all the work went. I says we were as bad as Hutterites, I think. Just work, work.
You mentioned sauerkraut. Did you make your own sauerkraut when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me how you would do that?
Well, like, as I say, we always had big gardens, or, not always that big, but it always gave a lot. So you had to cut that, but we preferred the Copenhagen brand for sauerkraut. I think there was another, I don't know what you call it, was also good, like for making sauerkraut. So you cut the heads and clean them and leave them maybe a day or so, and then you'd have that cabbage cutter. That's a must. That was probably back from Russia. I swear. They all had them and they were handed down. So you had those little knives in there, so in a square box you'd be cutting back and forth. And underneath you had a big tub. And so it was all shredded. And then you packed it in a big crock, a higher one, and more narrow. And great fun. You had to have this pickling salt, or no, I think it was the straight salt. Like, shake it on. You'd have layers, and then you'd have the potato masher. And you had to pound and pound and pound. And as you added more, shredded cabbage, and then the layer of salt, and then the pound some more. And pretty soon you got liquid. Pretty soon we had her made. She got up high enough to lick it to cover everything. But we had to do that as kids, that pounding, and that was hard. And Dad and Mom, they'd be busy. One would be shredding, the other one get it ready, and then pack the jars, or pack the crock, I mean. Oh, then when that was done, you had to leave it set, I forget how long. But there was also, you had to put a piece of, could have been a plate, I guess, and a stone or something on top, because it had to ferment, right, to get sauerkraut. So it took, I forget how many days. And then when that was all ready, was done and ready, then you packed her out into the jars. And then you had to seal it really tight and then put it down sour. So whenever you needed sauerkraut, and that was a lot of meals, were often with sauerkraut and pork and potatoes.
So was sauerkraut served as like its own dish, like you just ate
Mm-hmm.
sauerkraut, or was it served as part of the dishes? Like
part of the dishes, pretty well, yeah, because you tend to put it mash it on the potatoes. Some would cook everything in one kettle, but our tradition was, as far as I remember it, and as I've cooked it since, as our kids were growing up, that you kind of mash your potatoes, like in your plate, you cooked your potatoes whole and then added the sauerkraut on top, and then you mixed it up right into the potatoes. Oh, that was yummy.
What about supper? What would you usually have for supper when you were growing up?
Supper. Oh, there was a lot of pancakes made. It could have been dinner and supper. Well, you usually had maybe that homemade sausage or just straight pancakes. But there was usually, like beef, I would think, a lot of times beef and potatoes and mashed and gravy. Ketchup sauce. Onions in it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really? How do you make ketchup?
Well, ketchup, yeah, you can, but, with tomatoes and the ingredients you need to cook. It was a lot of work, but I know my mom did a lot. They all did, I think, all the women. And I've done it, like, when the kids were smaller, but I got away from that. But, I don't know. It's a lot of work. Like you have to put it through these, it's just like kind of blades, like, turn and turn and turn. And I don't know, I guess it tasted all right that I remember, but I don't know but now if I would. Because you're used to these bottom ketchup. But them big pails you used to get, Heinz ketchup, I think. Oh, that was to die for. We made ketchup sandwich, homemade bread, put ketchup on when we come home from school. Oh, but that was ketchup, though. Not like now. It's more sour and whatever.
Okay. We were just talking about dinners. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about the dinner meal? Or not dinner, supper,
Supper? Yeah, well, usually like Sunday dinners probably would be chicken, soup, chicken for sure. Like always something more special, like, salads and stuff. Well, supper was almost like dinner because, people worked so hard, so you had to have a better meal. Well, there'd be a lot of cakes and pies. Forgot about them. And, oh, my older sisters, they could make pie like nobody could. And my favorite was lemon pie, and they always knew that. Or, well, some of my other sisters also, or brother. And
so you talk about pies and cakes. Were those something that you would have after every supper, or were those a treat that you'd have occasionally?
Yeah, more so probably for Sunday or when you had company, maybe. Like then you wouldn't have the fruit, or sometimes you would have both. And but that was all homemade cakes and angel food cake. Oh, that was to die for because you had all your own pretty well ingredients except your flour and stuff. You had lots of eggs, which you needed, a good dozen or more for one batch of angel food cake. And what else? Oh, like years ago, to get even like in the fall, like some of the neighbors would get together and they'd load up your own grain and then you divide. I don't know how they must have figured something out to pay them back, like, so much wheat, like to go and get flour and even cream of wheat, like bags of different things, even pancake and cornmeal, like from the flour mill, Robin Hood Flour Mill in Saskatoon. So if somebody was lucky enough that had a 1-ton truck or a 2-ton, a few of the men would get together and that's how they would get our basics. And you could also probably bought some other things like maybe salt and stuff. But usually you got your basics from the store, but the bigger portion, and that got carried upstairs because in the winter months it was colder. Your flour would keep in the other things. And then they were in flour bags, not like in paper like now. And I've got one, I used to hang the window shut here in the kitchen part where the stove is to keep the sun out. And it still has, well, when you bleached them, you couldn't get all that color out because it would show the Robin Hood on there. You could still make it out. Like they even made their skirts with, flour sacks and stuff like that.
Really?
That's, things were tough years and years ago when I was growing up. But I don't remember me wearing one, but I think maybe my older sisters. Yeah.
Well, we'll go out the.
Oh,
the
sorry.
Door. No, you're good. You waited until, and I'll let us go right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we'll ask now is, how about some good old German dishes? What were some of the traditional German dishes that your mother made when you were a kid, or that you helped to make?
Zuckerkuchen, of course. That's kuchen, like where you make with flour, like cream. You had to have more cream and flour and baking powder, salt, vanilla. What else went in that dish? And then you rolled it out, like you added enough to make a softer dough, like not too soft, and you'd roll small pieces out, and then you would add some cream on top and sugar and cinnamon. And you put it in the oven and bake it maybe for about 50 minutes. Oh, that's a real German dish, man. And pierogies, what else? Noodles, of course, noodles. A lot had to be made because that was more the staple, growing up. Not so much when we got married. Like I made them too, like different kinds. But a lot was made like that they put in the soup. That was all homemade. And a lot of times they were cut a little thicker. You made them with flour and eggs. I don't know what else. Probably put some salt in. You rolled it out and let it dry. You used to lay it on the pillow so it would dry. And then you kind of roll it like a jelly roll and then cut little thicker pieces. And then you would cook them in boiling water. And when they were, I don't know, you didn't have to cook them that long, 15, 20 minutes maybe. Take it out, like strain it, the water off. And then you fried some breadcrumbs, like in, probably they used leaf lard is what they made their lard with for even making pies, like a special, finer lard, like from animals. Beef, I guess it was, and pork. So no wonder we get all these heart troubles. But that was the way of life then. That's the ingredients you used. So we'd fry these breadcrumbs and then throw them over top of these noodles. But, one thing must have been for sure was the prunes. You had to cook up prunes and that juice. Oh, that was good. So it took care of, one thing took care of another thing, if you know what I'm getting at with prunes. And, well, to have it cold, so that had to go in the ice cellar too to make it cold. It was like a fruit then. And you ate them with them noodles. Oh, that was super good. And what else did we? Oh, and these other egg noodles that you put eggs in, milk, and, well, the flour, of course, and baking powder, salt. And you kind of make them tighter, and then you would fry them in the fry pan. Like you had to roll them in your hand. They were just like a long noodle. As they were cooking, like you put water and salt and pepper in the bottom, or you could add potatoes, but we always liked them crusty, so we left the potatoes out. And, they were super good. So, but we also had, you had lettuce from the garden, and, also you had cream, right? You had something of everything. So we'd make kind of like a soup or whatever with them, like a cold soup. And we added like cream, like to make the juice, like, water, salt and pepper, and a little bit of vinegar, not too strong because, as you're eating, it's like a soup, you got all that liquid in it. But you'd be eating that plus these noodles. Oh, I'm hungry. I think I'm going to go mix them. So that was a lot of real German dishes, and that's what I think they really survived on, or depended on, I should say, the earlier years. And when we got married, I made a lot of that, and the kids, they loved it. See, they grew into this, but, now their kids, they don't really make that stuff, so this is kind of strange. And I remember Eric was on the oil rigs. He was way north, and he had to go in to bring some lunch, like for midnight lunch for the oil rig, the workers, like plus like himself. So all of a sudden this phone call comes. It was late in the evening. Mom, how do you make those egg noodles? Darn it. So he got in their kitchen, like he must have got in there somehow, and he made those darn noodles for them. He must have made big fat ones, but he says, my hands got clean after that, though, he said, because you're working on the rig, so sure you wash, but you can't get it perfectly clean. So he brought them out. I don't know if he brought them anything else out, and these guys couldn't believe, what is this? This is their lunch or whatever they're supposed to have. So they got out, they must have had peanut butter there, their their shack or wherever they, there has to be a shack there when they work. And so they put peanut butter on. I don't know if he might be able to tell you that one better. And but they ate it then that way, and they says, well, they sure didn't get hungry after that too soon. And I thought that was cute. Him learning how to make this just by telling him, but to remember, like what you got to put in the frying pan so they, get crusty. You got to add a little, like masala oil. Like I've used masala oil for many, many years. Like years ago, I guess they probably used, lard fat. Like you had to render it. And you had to throw all that fat in one of those wash boilers or whatever you call it, or a big kettle. Cut up all that and throw it in, and then you had to slowly start cooking it, like they call it rendering, and then it would get thin, and you had to watch you didn't burn it. And that's how you got your lard, and that it was kind of clarified or whatever you call it, That's how they even used it then to make pie crust and stuff. And the same like with butter, like you wanted to fry something in butter, well, you render it, and that means putting it in a little kettle and cooking it, and well, I shouldn't say cooking. Well, yeah, you kind of cook it slowly because it will burn, but oh, the smell in the house, was it ever, you just love that smell. But you like clarified it, I guess is what you call it. Rendering is like clarifying it. And you can fry potatoes or anything in it, and it tastes so much better because it had good flavor.
Is the kitchen, when you were growing up, was the kitchen inside the house?
Oh, yeah.
So in the summer, did it get really hot in there?
You ain't kidding. Even this house, until we had power. Coal and wood stove, and then the oil, we had oil burner in it.
Did you help with baking bread when you were growing up?
No, I ate it. I watched her.
How often would she bake bread?
Oh, you'd almost think sometimes when we were all home, almost every day, every second day for sure, because they had this big dish, and then they had this big kind of a tinish lid to put over top so it would stay warm and rise and stuff. It was, I think every farm or every home had this great big dish because most of them all had big families, so you had to make big batches.
You mentioned soups, that you would have soups for dinner or on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
What type
or during the week also.
What type of soups did you have?
Chicken noodle soup. Well, you take a hen, usually, and I think it was more for Sundays too, like boil a whole hen, and then you'd save all the broth, it was cooking in the water, it turns, to broth, I guess, and then they would stick it in the oven and roast it, and then, and it was good chicken. Well, it was grain-fed and everything, so why shouldn't it have been good? Because when you eat your own food, you look after it better. Make sure it's fed good. Wheat and barley and oats, but like wheat gives a good flavor, and barley, your meat. And all those farmers, they were smart, know what to feed the animals. Same with beef. And, well, now how I got off track.
Soups.
Oh yeah, soup. Yeah, beef soup too was a big thing. Yeah, because a lot of times we almost had soup quite often, like through the whole week, because that was kind of your basics. And well, like we loved a lot like homemade bread or buns, more so bread, I think, because maybe that went further. I don't know. But there was always syrup. Oh, when we come home from school, that had to be peanut butter and Roger syrup put on top, and that filled you pretty good. Yeah. Now, so I think I got off track again.
Peanut butter, though, would you buy peanut butter or would you make peanut butter?
They bought it. Like there was a great big pail, like it had a handle on it. It was fairly high, and it had just like a lot of oil on top, I guess, to kind of preserve it until it was bought. And then you had to stir that and stir to mix that right through. And but it was, everything tasted so more natural and stuff. And that was good peanut butter. And the same when you bought, like Roger's syrup, it was a great big pail too, but not as high as this peanut butter pail. It almost looked like peanut butter on the outside. It had this kind of a shiny color, sort of, kind of goldish or whatever, and the lid on. But I still go back to that halva. Oh, I'm still dying for that old-time halva.
When you were growing up, did you help with the butchering? You know, like getting chickens in and killing the chickens? And
Yeah. As I got a little older, not that old anyway, when my mom, well, we'd help her, like she'd scald them in hot water, help her carry the water down, and when she'd take them out, you dip them in cold water and then lay them out, then pick the feathers off. Yeah, that was helped. And then when the cutting up time come, I watched and watched, and I knew she had quite a few yet to cut up. While I'm just standing and watching, so why not learn? So there was two knives there. Well, one, well, okay, whatever you do to butcher them, and one then for for drawing. So there was usually two laying around. So I took one of the chickens, like they were cleaned, ready to be cut up, and took the knife, and Mom didn't say nothing. She just kept doing her work, and I took it up behind the car shed, and there was a bench there, and there was, I guess, probably some iron and stuff laying there, but I pushed some of the stuff aside, not thinking that you should have this washed, probably. So I just cut up and cut, tried to learn, but some of those joints, they didn't want to come very easy, because you had to kind of break them, like, and then cut them, like, because they were tough. So when I was done, it didn't look all that great, some of the pieces. I carried them down, and I laid them down beside hers where she was working, and she looked over. I mean, she just smiled. That's the way she was. The Auberly side, they were like more quiet, but they showed their love, I guess, or appreciation. They smiled and they approved. Approved it. And going back to my mom, where she grew up there, like once they come from Russia, she was about maybe 2 or 2.5 years old, and so how she ended up here in Canada was through her sister, Aunt Johanna. She come, like when she met her husband, like they were neighbors, like Lawrence Langer. So apparently he come out here, and then he said he was going back to the States to get married or to get his wife, and that was my mom's sister. So they got married, and they come out here, and they settled out west of Revenue in that coulee part there where it's government pasture now for cattle, where we used to take ours over the years. So she come out to visit my mom, and so she must have stayed for a while, because somehow she found my dad here. And I didn't know how soon then after, she come back, and then my parents got married here then in Canada, like in Saskatchewan. But through now her sister, she was able to come here. And then my grandmother, on my mom's side, Grandma Auberly, she was a Walt. That's where that name comes, maiden name was. And when grandfather died, I don't remember him. I don't know. I must have maybe very little or before I was born. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. So she used to come out once a year, like the summer months. Like Uncle Joe would put her on the train, and she'd come. I forget how far was it, where they had to wait for quite a while, or only the next day to come out this way. Then they had to pick her up. I forget where. But she always, we called her Weidergroßen. That means far away grandma. And at that time, I didn't know, I knew German. I started school. I didn't know a word of English. And so finally, it took me quite a few years to figure out what this Weidergroßen means. And heck, it means far away grandma. She lives far away, like far away grandma. And then, we'd go and clean the yard. Everything had to be just spick and span because she was coming. And we watched her like a hawk because we thought she was an endangered species because we really didn't know my grandma. Just, what they told us. So, she stayed for a while and we'd follow her everywhere. We must have been hard on her. So I guess she got older and sicker, and then when she always said she wants to come out to her girls and she wants to die here. And be darned if she didn't. She must have known, I guess, that it was getting close to the end. So she did come, and something about having a stroke. See, we were quite young yet. And she stayed at our place for a while, but she went out to my sister, or my mom's sister, Aunt Johanna, and that's where she stayed. I don't know, it didn't take that long, but from what I can gather, she had a stroke. Like she died then there in the house. But getting back to this, supposed to have had a stroke. And my older sister, Lena, that smart one, and me always being curious and, always had my nose where I probably shouldn't have had, maybe, want to find out why she died or is dying. And she said something about, I didn't understand what a stroke was. I don't know if my sister did, but she said she had a cut. That's what caused it. Well, like me, being different from everybody, I guess, wanted to die too, like she. So now how do I get this cut? That I can die too. And so I went, we had a fence along, where you drive and then you turn down the low part to drive up to the house because we're sort of on a hill. Well, darn it, there's that fence with the barbed wire. Well, gee whiz, when I think back, something was different about all this in my mind. So I went to tried to crawl through the fence and to make sure the barbed wire gets me in the side of the head. So I tried about 3 times. No, it wasn't happening. But then I got braver. And sure enough, I got a cut. You can still see the scar here. Pretty good. And it was bleeding, so I finally went to the house, and my sister pretty near died. And she run, and she got it, with a cold wash rag and then taped it. But so you should always say it the way it is. Don't find stories around it, because look what I could have done. I could have killed myself totally. Oh, I didn't know that I had all these stories.
They just crawl out of the woodwork, don't they?
Oh, so many stories. And I'm sure there's more, but I had one in mind before, but I forgot it.
Well, how about this? Names days. Were they celebrated when you were growing up?
Big time. Homemade wine. And we got to taste some, too.
Really?
My dad was always good. They used to make homebrew. Well, they won't bother now anymore. And I was always for the special occasion. Everybody would have a little drink. But for some reason, as little as I was, he always gave me a shot glass. And it was powerful stuff. Strong. But I drank it. I made a face, and heck, that tasted good. But he didn't give it to my other sisters, though. I don't know why he gave it to me. He maybe figured I was tougher. Oh.
So how would you celebrate a names day?
Well, pretty well the neighbors, but your relatives for sure. They all come to the house for supper, and there was all good food, whatever. And even made ice cream, because usually most names days were kind of summer months or when it was hot. And then there would be a big midnight supper a lot of work for them mothers. But they all pitched in and helped, and I don't know, it was a big thing, those names days. It was just more so like for the men, not so much for the women. They were acknowledged too, but the men, that was number one. Big names days.
What type of activities would they do when people would come over and visit?
I think they sat around a lot and visited, and had good visits, like, and probably were drinking their wine or maybe a little whiskey, I guess, and food. And sometimes maybe they played horseshoe. Just depends. And
do you know how your parents made the homemade wine?
Choke cherry wine had to be good. Yeah.
How about the home brew? Do you know what they did for that?
Oh, they had to get this wheat kind of fermenting, and that usually was put upstairs where we slept because it was warmer up there, but it didn't smell so good because it had to ferment. It had to be warm enough. And then, I don't know, they had to have this distillery or whatever, and they had cooking things in these pipes, and it would drip out. But boy, we were ready to go to school, and they'd always be eyeing that highway way over. Like, this was always done in the winter because they always had hopes nobody would, because they probably would get fined, or I don't know, whatever it was. They weren't supposed to be making homebrew, and or some would bootleg, so they try and stop this. So I know they'd be watching. And as soon as they see a different sleigh going, and they figure, oh, if they come in, the police, they would come around and check, because they know they were all doing that. Oh, I kind of remember that as a kid, and they were quite worried. But I don't know, in our place, our folks, they just kind of made like for when company come, and not that they overly made much, and I think most families did that. But there was all some that were in that trade.
What about beer? Would your parents make beer?
I can't really remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've mentioned sausage a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever help with making sausage?
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell me about that?
Yeah, there's one. Homemade sausage. Well, it was always beef and pork. More pork than beef, so the salt and the pepper had to go in, and then they would take garlic and add hot water, piece of garlic, or chop it up, and kind of let it simmer, in that dish, and then strain it to mix it. And they added maybe a little saltpeter or something so it would get a little color. But getting back to this sausage, I was just a kid, and this was before Christmas too, a few days. Had to make the homemade sausage. Okay, so in those days you had sacks, like sugar, little sacks of sugar, and also salt. And they were put upstairs, and they were put kind of side by side. So, okay, Liz, you go and get me some salt. So it was dark, didn't have a flashlight, but I could feel, I knew where it was. So be damned if I didn't bring down salt. Yeah, okay, brought it down, and Dad put it in and started mixing, but thank God it wasn't that much though. But be darned, so when they were made and they cooked it that night after church, here didn't taste right, here tasted sweet. Here it was, the sugar. Oh, there was a few words said, oh boy, but I don't know, he said them so fast. I don't know if they were swear words or what. But I didn't really get a scolding, because it was easily a mistake. I should have tasted it, I guess, or Dad says, maybe I should have tasted it. So after that, it got tasted, though. Sugar instead of salt. Next time, they got put further apart, other things in between. Oh, heavens. Oh, and another story was that cellar in the kitchen part. In the winter, the stove went into the living room because it was too cold. And so we were eating. Okay, I was supposed to go down and get a jar of fruit up. Well, usually there was no light except, your cola light in the living room where you were. But you knew enough where the cellar, the hole was to open and the steps to go down. Holy Moses. I went out to go down that cellar. Yeah, I got down there all right. I flew down. Here the stupid lid was open. Oh, I was laying down. They didn't know what was happening. I wasn't coming. Well, they heard something, so they come and looked. Here I was laying down there. But I guess I was all right once I kind of come out of it. And here, my sister Helen, oh, that woman, or say that girl at that time, she left the darn cellar door open, or lid open. Well, she got a good scolding.
How old were you?
Oh, I don't even think I was going to school, or maybe I could have been. Couldn't have been maybe more than 6, 7, maybe only 5, I think.
You mentioned back at the beginning when we first started doing the interview that you would occasionally get toys for Christmas, like a doll or a purse. What type of toys did you have when you were growing up?
Later on, cutout dolls. That had to be number one to dress them. You could get those big books like, where there's cutout dolls in there. And we had puzzles, cards, a lot of card playing and puzzles with the cola lamp, and made popcorn in that potbelly stove in the evenings, and sunflowers. Ah, sunflowers all over the floor. And we just spit them out, like everybody, like Dad, Mom, everybody would be.
Where
That
did
was
you
our
get the
pastime.
sunflowers from?
Grew them in the garden. And well, later on you could buy, but usually you grew your own. But I still, because we had to pound them to try and get, when they're dried hard enough, to get the seeds out. You know how hard that was? Oh, when I think back, I just don't like sunflowers anymore. But the same with corn. We used to have to rub and rub to get corn that we could pop. You buy the kind that you could, popping corn, different colors too. And oh, that was hard as kids, man. But well, they bought, I guess, later on too, because you could, we made some almost every night, like for pastime, and a lot of playing cards.
What type of card games?
West, Rummy, and I think it was mostly West because more could join in the game. Philip, he doesn't like playing cards, but my folks, we had a card table and chairs. They would join in. We'd always play together as a family in puzzles, and I know there was other, but I can't really remember for sure, other toys.
Do you remember any games that you used to play? Like outdoor games or activities you used to do as a kid?
Yeah, Auntie over the ice house with the ball. And my mom, like when Dad was out in the fields after supper in the evening, she'd come out and play with us. But the ice house was up on the hill, and then it would go kind of on a slant down towards where the cattle pens were. And we try not throw them so hard, or that she could catch them, or we could catch them, and they'd run down. And she enjoyed that, I think, more than we did maybe. And we'd run and catch the ball so she wouldn't have to run all that way to get them. Well, we were younger, right? Lakes would go faster. So, and well, even Dad, when they had time, they would play catch with us and skipping rope, a lot of skipping, and marbles, carve holes out. the other end of the house where there was shade, and had a big marble. He was the boss, I guess, and then the little ones, shoot him out of the way. Oh, and a lot of times we'd lay and watch the clouds, you know, in the shade, like in the afternoons in the east side. And oh, there were big clouds and they were low. And we used to wonder, how can we find out what they feel like, those clouds? And we thought about it. So me and my sister, we were thinking, we'll make a long, long stick and a dipper at the end. And then we'll poke it up trying to get some of these clouds down. So that was some pastime too. It was games. Oh, and another time, we had, you know, raised all your chickens and ducks and geese and name it. They were all set, and you know, to raise the little ones. And they were in this pen, and we come home from school with the buggy and the sleigh. I was driving. My older sister was gone then. And here there was a hawk, and he was flying, and Mom was calling to drive after him. He's got a baby turkey in its beak, and it was going way back to where the bundle stack was. It was a little ways. And did we drive and screamed at him? And I guess we scared him so bad, he dropped it. But then, yeah, of course, sure, he dropped it, but at least he wasn't allowed to eat it. And it was, well, you know, it was dead, I guess, knocked out. And so we brought it home and gave it to Mom. At least I think she was satisfied. He didn't get it all together. So.
Did you have a lot of problems with hawks and other type of like coyotes and
things
like that?
The stinky skunks. Oh, there's another good story. Anyway, how did it go? With my my dad and Eddie and Lena, Mary, the oldest one, Helen, probably they were shingling the chicken house roof, and I don't think we were going to school, maybe 4 or 5 years old, me and my other sister. We were supposed to go get the cows because they were busy shingling, and it was hot. So we were supposed to go and get the cows from the pasture. Okay, we'll go. And you know, little kids, they're slow and trotting away. And along the fence line here, it's just like a cat. And I called, kitty, 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 yeah, kitty, kitty. It wasn't really listening, but it was going slow. And my sister, he must lift his tail. You know what happens when a skunk does that. And it wasn't a cat, it was skunks. A little baby skunk. And it looked exactly like our cat at home, our cats. But she was smart enough, she stayed back because she got the whiff first and I didn't. So I kept following it slowly. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. And the tail would go up, but I didn't know what this meant. But pretty soon I found out it stank and stank. So I let the stupid thing go, but I figured, that's mean, kitty. Yeah. So I went home, started walking home, so slow. Rita got home first, and my dad smelled. So he knew there was a skunk by. Till I got home, well, I stank the worst. So then he right away come and got the gun because, you know, skunks, all the baby chickens and that, they clean them out at night. Because when there was a fuss going on with the mother hens, Dad knew there was a skunk out there. So any time of the night, Eddie would have to get up and they'd go out with the guns and get them. And usually they were lucky enough to get them. But anyway, I stank. Oh boy, did I stink. I couldn't even stand myself. So my sister... Lena and Mary, well, it was Lena, she felt sorry for me. So she put me in this big round tub out in the porch, open air porch. And she says, well, I think tomato juice is supposed to work for that. So she tried that. No, still didn't work. Well, she hit me in the water. Nothing worked. But she tried and tried, and she had to suffer smell like that. But now what? I still stank, and here was bedtime. Yeah, now what? Nobody wanted to sleep with me, or I didn't want me to sleep with them, I should say. Oh, boy. So my sister Mary, as kind as she always is, she felt sorry for me, so she let me sleep in the foot end. But I don't think nobody was very happy that night or could sleep. So that was my skunk story.
That's a good one. We've also kind of talked a little bit about some other holidays, but were like Valentine's Day and Halloween or New Year's, did you celebrate those back then?
Hmm. Dressed up, and you should have seen
Really?
how ugly we were. We dressed the worst. And oh heck, at Halloween time, as we got a little older, this wasn't right away. See, you're on the farm. So it was nicer that Halloween, and we thought we'll go to the neighbors. They weren't far away. So we dressed up, white, sheets and big nose, cardboard nose glued on and stuff. But we had to crawl through the fence, a barbed wire fence. And be darned if we didn't get caught. And we were screaming, we thought somebody got us. And till we got this all untangled and figured out what's happening. And when we got to the neighbors, they have to laugh. And the scene was torn. Oh, that was fun. But you'd always go to the neighbors, and well, on the farms, like usually it was always rainy or cold, but that time it was really nice, so we had a good time getting caught in that barbed wire. And they figured out, well, we were all, arranged different, even our big cardboard nose, crawling through, there's only that much space. Oh.
So, how about Valentine's Day? Was that celebrated when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah, like more so when we started school.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was Valentine's made and shared, and everybody, one thing the sisters taught us, you treated each other the same. Like, if you didn't really like somebody, they always says, don't send them a Valentine card. But that's the one you send one first. And you'd be surprised, you ended up being the best friends. Oh.
How about New Year's?
Not really until we got older.
And birthdays?
Well, we always acknowledged that it was New Year's. We kind of had, at home, like, kind of, maybe a special dinner, like goose or duck, like for New Year's Day, like something a little special.
And what about birthdays?
Oh yeah, birthdays had to be celebrated.
How would you celebrate a birthday back then?
Well, we always got this special raisin cake, and I hate raisins. But somehow my sisters, they just knew there always had to be a raisin cake, chocolate raisin cake. But it was all right. And then depends what time of the year you had birthday, you got ice cream. Well, in the winter you could make ice cream easier, but in the summer it took longer.
We talked a little bit about the games that you would play with your sisters. But what about during the winter months? What type of activities did the kids do during the winter months?
Well, there was a lot of chores, you always help, but like activities, we used to have to chop wood and see that you chop little pieces, so you had, for the sleigh, like you had took hot coals out from the house or from the school, like that's when we were going to school, to do, activities to do and help with the chores and maybe scrub floors, clean up, and help with dishes always. Oh, those kettles, coal and wood stove. You always had the hot water in the reservoir at the end of the coal and wood stove.
We've talked a lot about food, but we never talked about the behavior around a table and how it was set up. I mean, would you all eat dinner together?
Oh, yeah.
How did dinner time usually work?
Well, you always tried to, like, dinner on time, like 12 o'clock. Supper you tried at 6 or at 5, maybe. Well, I can't remember. Did we? Yeah, we had supper first, and then we went to milk. So the other ones had to clean up and, clear the table, do the dishes or whatever. And I'm losing track of my mind. In here too long.
Was dinner a quiet time or was it a talking time?
Well, you were pretty hungry, so I think we didn't always talk really that much, not like now, You can even start a war at supper or dinner.
Did you say a prayer before dinner?
Oh, yeah, right. That was number one. Always had to say a prayer before and after. And when we went to bed, like even Phil and I, like when we were first married, always said night prayers together.
When you were a kid, were those in German or were those in English?
At first, when we were littler, I kind of remember German. Oh, yeah, Hartgut's, how do you say it? He starts saying the prayer. I kind of have it in mind, but I don't think it would come out right. And always we prayed the rosary, last of all. We all had to kneel down. We got a chair, and we leaned on it, kneeling. And Dad would always lead the rosary. But as time went on, it's just like this merry-go-round world we're living in. It's gone. Things have changed. Like you didn't farm as big. You worked hard, but you were still able to do those things that meant so much to the people, to the way of life. I'm not making sense, am I?
No, you
But,
are. You are. So good. With church, since you brought up the rosary and we've talked about prayers, how often did you go to church when you were a kid?
Well, every Sunday. I mean, you had to be dead sick before you stay home because everybody went no matter what. But if you had like chicken pox or something along that line, well, usually one of the older ones or maybe even Mom would stay home then.
How far was the church from your house?
From our place, 2.5 miles maybe.
How would you get there?
At Revenue, it was. Pardon me?
How would you get there?
Pretty well with horses, sleigh, buggy, until finally they got a Nash car or whatever you call it. I forget what year. Had to be in the 50s, I would think, early.
So when you would go to church, was the father somebody that was an approachable person, or was he kind of?
Oh, they were toughies in those days. Oh boy, you couldn't do anything wrong. They're pretty tough. Well, I can't blame them. Look, they had to be celibate. Where if they were married, that's the Catholic deal. So it must have been a very hard life for them to be kind of alone, you'd say, and have to live up to what they had to learn or be.
Do you remember when you were growing up some of the religious activities that you would participate in?
Oh, well, there was always that Corpus Christi where you had special time of the year towards the spring when those honeysuckles would be ready. We'd pick those flowers. Then we had a basket, and they were all made so nice, like our mom. She made them and made our dresses so pretty. And it was a special service, like church, where everybody would go. It was a special celebration. And then we'd be strewing these honeysuckles, or whatever you call these yellow flowers. And it was like a procession. And then when there was confirmation, when I was done with confirmation, like the others that come, there will always be just like a guard, like beside, like I was able to have this big flower and be kind of I don't know how the heck you call it, because I still have pictures like where you stand, you got this nice big flower beside them, and the same with a boy would be standing on the other side. It was just like your flower girls or boys or whatever along that line. Special things that was with the religion as they come here. And that's what kept our parents going, plus us kids as we were growing up, You had to have faith to keep going. And I guess it must have worked for everyone.
And that seems like a good note to end it on.
Really?
Yes.
Right
that's
on.
a perfect note